Guardians take game one. We react. We go behind the scenes, and we try to keep the chaos contained. In the midst of a crazy game one that featured 5 runs in the first inning, and the Guardians following that bullpen chaos theory that the Detroit Tigers were hoping to implement. Through all of that, Zach managed to break his headphones, but he's here. And we're excited to do a little bit of reacting, a little bit of behind the scenes. I hope we got it all covered today on the Selby's Godcast. What's up, buddy?
We're going to go TJ and then technology chaos, and that's how we're going to get through this.
Happy to be here. I got to get some of my thoughts out if you were a part of the YouTube live show. I know many of you already streamed and joined in. That was a lot of fun. We intend to do a lot of those, or at least I intend to do a lot of those as the playoffs continues. And Zach, I hope to do it for the next month or so. But I got to get out a lot of my feelings and reactions. I'm eager to see where you're at now. You've had some time to process this game one. It was so wild at the outset. 5 runs, including a 3-run bomb by Lane Thomas, who has proven to be the greatest trade acquisition of all time at the deadline. Seriously, what was the reactions after the game? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of ho-hum. I mean, in terms of after the game ends, you hear that same post-game victory playlist that you heard throughout the season. You walk into the clubhouse and there's guys playing cards, and Tyler Freeman and Will Brennan are playing Mario Kart, and it is just status quo. And what did we hear all year? Austin Hedges beating the drum of, we want to treat every game like a playoff game so that when the playoffs get here, nothing's surprising. And that's what it felt like. This was game 162 because their actual 162 got rained out. So, but it's fitting because it's just like the regular season. This is, I think we learned pretty early on, honestly. Maybe we didn't know it when Bieber went down because we didn't know if this team actually had staying power. But once you realize that they were a contender, I think we knew the formula. A lot of bullpen, enough hitting, and getting the good starting pitching when it's the right person to do it. And all those ingredients came to fruition in game one, and that's the blueprint. Can they do that 10 more times? We'll find out. But you couldn't have scripted it any better. And I think to the Guardians, it's just like, yeah, well, that's what we've been doing. That's what we expect to do. So, ho-hum, here we are.
But you know what is interesting, though? This is a little bit different than just your average regular season game because Vogt entered this knowing he's got an off day today, and he can play around with that. And I wondered, when we wondered about it on the live stream, he had the quick hook for Bybee. You go to your bullpen, and I think it was largely fueled by you've got a pen of guys that haven't pitched in a while. And I know the score was spread out, but you still want them to be sharp. You don't maybe necessarily want the first time that they're in there to be the first time in a week that they've pitched, and now it's a 1-run game. So I get it from that perspective, but I'm wondering, was he even a little bit more aggressive with the hook, knowing that he had the off day to play with, in addition to wanting to just get the guys the work that they probably needed?
Well, I think that's important too. You don't want Clase and those guys to get too rusty, and that's, I think not necessarily them, but there were pitchers who during the week in these simulated games were admitting like, yeah, I look up and the scoreboard says I threw, because they had like the legit metrics on the scoreboard throughout the week. And so you can see every bit of data you need on pitch movement and profile and obviously velocity. And so like these guys they're throwing a pitch and you got the fake crowd noise going and they look up and they normally throw 95, 97 and it says 92.1. And it's like, yeah, I guess it's a little hard to completely simulate things how you would want to. And so you didn't want your ace relievers to go 10 days without getting in a real game. And not only that, but keep in mind, aside from Class A, the other 3, Heron, Gaddis, and Smith, they're new to this. Like, they haven't had that sort of situation. So while I'm sitting there thinking like, probably a good time to get like Walters, get Sabrowski in there. And then I was like, but wait, the other guys who you're going to lean on, they haven't done this either. So
yeah,
let them.
Everyone's in the same boat.
Right. Instead of their first playoff experience being that 2-2 game in the 8th inning with the bases loaded. Like, let them come in, and it's gonna, they're gonna have the butterflies, the juices going anyway, because it's a sellout crowd. You just, like, it is different. You can try to trick yourself, but you can't fully do it. And so it's still a good time. And like you said, you've got the day off. And they made such quick work of the Tigers. I think Gaddis needed 7 pitches maybe, and Clase needed 8. So it's like, I'm thinking, do you want to let the Tigers have an extra look at these guys if it's not completely necessary? And then it's like, that look lasted 15 seconds, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be a tightrope walk when things got spread out, and we started seeing Vogt go to the bullpen. I think somewhere in the back of your mind, you still have to be cognizant of Detroit is seeing your guys more. Even if it's for 7 pitches, that's 7 more pitches of mental data that was not existent before. So I think part of me was curious about that, but I still believe the desire to make sure that your guys were sharp, that they've had some actual work and experience outweighed anything that could exist in the realm of, well, Detroit is going to see more of your relievers. And I think the most important thing is everyone in that bullpen, Cleveland believes, is good and has the stuff to be there. This is not a smoke and mirrors sort of bullpen that they've thrown together, which they have done in years past. These are guys that, when you're looking at that stuff plus leaderboard, you've got many guys up there where you'd want to be. And so I would imagine that, yes, they're thinking about giving additional looks to a team, but they also just believe in the stuff, even if you know what's coming. And here's a reliever that maybe only throws 2 pitches. Well, what's it going to be? It's either this one or that one. It's a 50-50 shot. You're going to get it right. Most importantly, even if you know my fastball's coming, if I put it where I want and execute, you're not touching it. And I think there's probably a lot of belief in that has to outweigh any sort of downside from the other teams seeing them as much as they possibly will by the end of this series.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard not to draw parallels to 2016, and I feel like I always do this, where I always preface it by saying I hate to make the comparison because it's lazy, and 2016 was just, it was a special run. No one saw it coming, and things gelled at the right time. But I went back and I looked at the box score from Game 1 against Boston in the division series, and remember, we had no idea like what that was going to look like. I think everyone's expectations were low. They didn't have Carrasco, they didn't have Salazar, they didn't have Michael Brantley, and you were saying like, okay, like there was it was similar to this year where there was no American League team that was like the big bad Rangers or Blue Jays or Red Sox. Like, I think the teams were all pretty evenly matched, but still, you just felt Cleveland going with Bauer, Kluber, and Tomlin. Like, how far could those guys get you? And you look at the pitching lines from that game. Trevor Bauer went 4 2/3. Then came Miller. Then came Shaw. Then came Allen. And they covered the other 4 1/3. And it's the same thing. Now, that game was closer because Boston scored 3 against Bauer. But Miller came in 40 pitches out of the bullpen and came in the 5th inning. And we had an idea that was going to happen because we saw them. Remember, they had to resort to some bullpen games in September, and like we knew they'd lean on him a lot, right? But remember the reaction from like national media and from just talking heads after that, where Andrew Miller in the 5th inning. Are you kidding me? This is breaking baseball.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, and it was funny because Bibby's on the mound and he faced Parker Meadows for a 3rd time in Game 1, and then Kerry Carpenter's coming to the plate, and I remember saying I was like, yeah, I think this is when they're gonna go get him, and then Vogt comes out of the dugout, and I'm just thinking like, man, we've come a long way. Like 8 years ago, no one would be saying like, you got to get this guy. It's the 5th inning. Come on, you can't let him face the 3rd time through. And even though Bibby hadn't given up a run, it's like you knew that was just what made sense to the coaching staff, how they had this sketched out, and you knew like 4 1/3 innings for the 4 horsemen of the bullpen, like that's nothing. They could probably cover 7 or 8 innings if they had to.
That's what I was thinking about. when I thought of Andrew Miller coming out when he did in 2016 and comparing it to what they're doing now, yeah, we all understood this could be the time in the game where this could be most crucial, depending on where you're at in the lineup. And hey, you're going to go down with your best pitchers, and if you're going to lean on them, you're going to lean on them heavily. But I also still felt like that's a lot of ball game for 3 guys to cover, and it was. I mean, you could feel that by the time Miller was done in some of these games. It was like that felt like
he
a
threw
starter
40,
workload.
and Cody Allen threw 40 pitches in that first game.
Yeah,
and they had a game the next day.
But it was crazy, and nothing feels like that with this bullpen. Like you said, it's almost like they want to petition to add a few more innings at the end of this game so we can mix in a few of these other guys that we really like. It's so different. And yeah, it really was the 3 horsemen for that 2016 bullpen, but ultimately it came down to Miller and Allen. Those were the 2 guys that you trusted beyond trust. For this bullpen, we were kind of joking about it on the live stream. Who would you not feel comfortable with in a semi-tight game? Is there anybody on this playoff roster right now that you would say, get them far away from whatever inning they're in?
I mean, yeah, like Cantillo and Williams, and I don't know. There are some unknown commodities, I think, but
those aren't really your bullpen guys. I mean, they are, but they're there more for length from either side.
Maybe Eli Morgan, but that's maybe just me being unfair to someone because they only throw 92.
No. With a Bugs Bunny changeup.
Right.
But the funny thing is, you can say that about Eli Morgan, and I don't disagree. I mean, I would put him further down this list, even below Walters and Sobrowski at this point. But what was his season ERA? I mean, it's ridiculous.
195.
And you don't trust it. You don't trust this guy. Now, compare that to maybe the 2016 bullpen. Yeah, the top 3 you trusted, and then Otero, you had a great year, so kind of trust him. But McAllister, Manship, I don't know. I guess if you have to, this bullpen, I'm like seeking out opportunity. Oh, I can't wait for Walters to get it. Oh, I can't wait for Sobrowski to get. I can't wait to see these guys in the postseason. That's what makes it so very different.
And that's why I think you can be aggressive. Like, Matthew Boyd doesn't have to go 5 innings. And it's okay. Tanner Bybee didn't even have to go 5 innings. So, yeah, I'm with you. And the beauty of Clase is he's so efficient that you never want to plot out like, okay, we're gonna save the 8th and 9th for him. But you could. It wouldn't, like, if you cornered yourself into that, it's not the worst plan. You know,
I think
that's more, and the days off help.
Isn't that more important if you're in the 9th inning of a tie game and then he can come back out for the 10th?
Sure. I'm just saying,
but you have the
if you
option.
run into some major trouble, and because Cade Smith is the guy they love to just clean up the messes, maybe we should call him the maid.
We should not.
If you burn Cade in the 3rd inning and he pitches the 3rd and the 4th, and you're like, all right, it's still a tight game. Like, yeah, let's go to Walters here, but maybe he gets into trouble. You know what I mean? Like, there are ways you could piece this together, and you get to the 8th, and it's like, let's just go to Class A now.
Yeah.
Like, that's not your first choice if you're dreaming things up, but again, it's so interesting because it's like they put these guys through every possible test during the regular season. Remember, Class A went 4 straight days, and then they like hit his cleats and kept him in the dugout for the 5th game because they knew he would ask to pitch if he went out to the bullpen. And then he threw 2 innings at Yankee Stadium, and he came in and he asked for a 3rd, and Vogt said, absolutely not. And they tested out Smith in the 5th inning, in the 8th inning, with guys on base, with the clean inning. Gaddis pitched all over the place. Herron has pitched all over the place. Walters started a game. And he and Sobrowski, I feel like, got good experience in some tight games and some not so tight games. You know, as much as you can gain in just the September call-up. And the whole point of that, Vogt said from the beginning, like, he wants all of his relievers comfortable pitching in any setting. And I think that pays off here. And I think that, again, like, it was good for those guys to just get your feet wet, feel what it's like to pitch in that environment, and finish off the blueprint. I mean, that was, again, like that was, they could not have scripted that better.
I'm wondering how much did the quick hook also have to do with the thought that if this series goes the way that it could, you will be seeing Bybee again against Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're really familiar with him. Like, how many starts does he have against them this year? But
I think 4.
Maybe because Detroit has mixed in some new hitters. I don't know. I haven't looked at their plate appearances over the year, but the version of Tanner Bybee that he is today and the way that you think he's going to thrive against Detroit, maybe you don't want to overexpose that either. And so that plays some role here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is a different Tigers team. They haven't squared off since July 30th. So there's some new pieces in there from the trade deadline or just guys who weren't up or healthy back then. But, I think the big thing is, and I think Bybee had to learn this during the season anyway, but you have to have multiple ways to get guys out. Sometimes you have to pitch backwards. Sometimes you have to use completely different things in the second time through the order than you did in the first. And I mean, he was throwing a bunch of sinkers yesterday. Do we trust baseball savant? And even like the scoreboard was saying sinker quite a bit. So if that is legitimate, and I don't know if he was asked that. I don't think he was asked that post game. But that's new. That'd be a way to get guys out that maybe they haven't seen as much. So yeah, you're right. Like, if he's going to face them again in a few days, then like there are no surprises here. And I do think the good thing is like he didn't get into a ton of trouble. So it's not like he's got to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch.
And the little bit of trouble that he did get in, whether it was self-induced by early throwing with a little bit of extra energy, I think, and he had to learn to bring that down, or at least how to focus it into what he was doing. And I think that's an important lesson too. You realize every day you take the mound in the postseason, yes, it probably comes down a little bit, but it's more about what do I do with that extra adrenaline and how do I pitch with it? And maybe that's an important lesson. But every time he got into just a little bit, whether it was the first inning or later, after Cleveland takes the 5-0 lead, he would end every threat so quickly. He did it with some ground balls, got some double plays. They escaped a couple of times just over the course of a game with a double play to quickly silence any sort of threat. That was important to not only just get the early lead, but he never let it manifest into anything more than just, oh, that was kind of cute for 5 seconds.
I think that's been a big focus for him throughout the season. And he reached a point, I remember him telling me that he was just so self-critical, that he said that even if he threw a perfect game, he would be frustrated by giving up some hard contact that like Jimenez just happened to make a great play on to preserve the perfect game. And just setting these unreal expectations. And I was talking to Austin Hedges, who said like the biggest difference he made from the beginning of the year till now is the beginning of the year, he'd give up an early home run and he would just be grinding. He'd just be so frustrated. You could tell that we've talked about it. Like the guy does not conceal his emotions on the mound. So you can see how pissed he is. And you let that affect you. Like that's a detriment. That hurts you as you continue out there. And as the year went on, Hedges said, like, Tarik Skubal is going to win the Cy Young Award. And like, it's not like his ERA is 0. He gives up runs when he pitches. So you can't be so dead set on being perfect. You have to just be good enough. And I think Bybee finally grew to accept that. And it was interesting. I was watching him. I watched him walk off the mound after every inning. And a lot of times these guys, remember like Cal Quantrill would have these like big animated celebrations as he's walking off the mound when he escapes a jam. And Bybee would do it too. And I watched him after he escaped that first inning, and he was just like he looked like a stone cold killer. Just like you could tell he was bottling everything up. And he did that inning after inning after inning, where I think earlier in the year, if he got out of a big jam, he'd be like pumping his fists and yelling into his glove. And so it was interesting because then you see him get pulled and he walks off the mound and he stares up at the crowd and I watched him, I was reading his lips and he said, "Let's effing go." He shouted to the crowd. And then he like raised his arms to like pump them up even more. And you could tell that was finally him releasing the emotion he had bottled up for 4 2/3 innings. And I just think that's a different pitcher, a different mindset, and probably like the way you have to gut through a stressful postseason start. He said it felt like he had a lead block in his stomach for the last 3 days leading up to it just because of the butterflies he felt. So, it worked out well. I think you learn from that. Probably feel a little bit less of it moving forward, but at least you know what to expect.
I thought it was extremely key in the third inning where you had that Sun-aided double that Thomas lost at the last minute. Whether he lost it, I don't know. He would tell you he should have caught it, I'm sure. But that could have been a time where maybe that run scores. And that's it, but that's still one run off, and now you're one swing away with a grand slam from the game being tied. And he shut that down, but he shut it down before even getting to the top of the lineup again, and he struck out Rogers. And it was like, you know what? He's good. When he survived that, the first inning, I think we all, not that I don't believe in him, but when you have nothing to go on, you don't know how people are going to react. And you survived it. But when he got through the second inning, I was like, no, he is perfectly fine. When you survive the first inning and then you come out and then you end the threat quickly after somebody gets on second base through a fault that's not really of your own, other than they hit it close to the warning track, I felt like he's in control. Everything is good here. Cleveland is set up exactly the way that they want. And I didn't really feel much anxiety the rest of the way when I saw him escape that jam. And I thought that was important for him too. Every time is a unique test that he's never gone through before. And it doesn't mean every time he gets put in that position again, he's going to have success. But it's not going to be from a matter of inexperience that he's not going to.
This is also a lineup that you should pitch well against. It's not the Tigers' strength. There's a lot of guys in there who are, pretty much everybody is doing this for the first time. I know they had a couple
people
playoff
would say
games
that about
already,
Cleveland too.
Yeah, well, but less so. Colt Keith. Like you should take advantage of his inexperience and his youth. Trey Sweeney. And these are hitters that your ace should be able to get out. So I just overall, he passed his test with flying colors, and it wasn't 7 scoreless, but it didn't need to be. I think that's the main thing. And he's also, I remember just early in the season, if he went like 5 1/3, gave up 2 runs, and the team won 5-2, like he'd be frustrated post game, and he'd say like, really want to get through at least 6 innings. And he's smart. He even said, he's like, and Carl Willis said this a couple weeks ago, but no one wants to leave the game. Bobby never wants to leave the game. I wrote this the other day. I think I said it to you, TJ. His move is like, you see the manager coming and you look up at the sky. It's almost, you just avoid eye contact. Maybe they'll just turn around, go back to the dugout, and you can stay in the game. But he did that move.
Why didn't you take him out? He didn't look at me. I don't know.
Vogt came out. Bobby looks at the sky, but then I think he looked at the bullpen door and saw that 6'5" Canadian cyborg coming in to strike out everybody he faces, and I think it makes you a little more accepting of your fate there. So these pitchers know that. Like Boyd's not going to go into game 2 thinking, all right, how can I get through 7 innings? How can I do this? I've got 110 pitches to use.
Yeah, been trained to trust the guy that's coming in after you. It'd probably be a different situation with a lot of these teams in the postseason. You're seeing Kansas City hold a lead at Yankee Stadium. And do you think they have a supreme confidence that their bullpen's going to come in and hold that lead? Because they didn't. And a couple of those runs scored on bases loaded walks. Not even really being earned by New York, given away by Kansas City. It's a funny thing is you're looking around the postseason and I'm thinking, does Cleveland really belong here? Do they belong with the juggernaut Yankees? Look at that lineup. And even if it's not as great towards the bottom, they have two of the greatest superstars on the planet at the top of that lineup. And they've got a starting pitcher like Garrett Cole. I know he's not Garrett Cole of unicorn status of a few years ago, but there's still some, there's still something to that. Do the Guardians really belong with a team like that? Or looking over at the National League, and it's that bullpen I keep coming back to when I see other teams lose their leads late. And yeah, that could happen to Cleveland because they gave up runs this year. There was an ERA attached to the bullpen, so they do eventually give up runs, but it's not often. And they really just don't cough up leads when they give it to. We have to trust that this offense is going to be able to do enough that it matters. And they did certainly in game one. We can talk more about Lane Thomas and all that stuff, but it's that bullpen that it's like, yeah, they do belong because they've got such a key advantage over every team. If they just get one run better than the other team at any point in the game, it might be over. And that's a big thing, especially in the postseason when you can lean on those guys as much as they're going to.
They're now 72-2 when they lead after 6. Jeez, the old cliche of, shorten the game, make it a 6-inning game. No, literally. Literally. That's what they do.
No, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves either because they have a huge test staring them in the face in the mold of what we all believe is going to be the American League Cy Young Award winner in Tarik Skubal, and probably 2 times in this series unless they somehow find a way to just take care of it before they get back to him on the mound. It's going to be an interesting test because we saw how they handled this bullpen chaos that Detroit threw at them, and I give Vogt a lot of credit for the way that he stacked the lineup. I'm curious if he's going to do the same thing because Skubal's going to be in there longer. Do you put Lane Thomas now in the 2-hole? But he was in that 5 spot because Holton was going to come in, and they knew he might only face 4 batters, and so if you had have done that differently, you could maybe put Thomas in the 2nd spot and Fry in the 5th spot. You just made it more difficult for Detroit to ask themselves, knowing that Lane Thomas was going to stay in the game. Fry was no guarantee that he was. Do you instantly go to the bullpen here? Now, they put enough runs up on the board and made it interesting that they were going to go to the bullpen regardless, and then we saw Lane Thomas hit the 3-run homer. But I'm curious, does Vogt still put out the same lineup because, again, they're facing a lefty, or does he handle it differently because he knows that this is going to be a lefty that, if Detroit has their way, he's going to be in the game through the 5th and 6th inning?
But wouldn't you keep it the same? Unless you think Thomas is just that much of a better hitter against lefties than Fry?
I personally would because I like the idea of giving a team a difficult decision once they get through Naylor. Do you leave a lefty in to face Lane Thomas, or do you bring in the righty there, and then that's when you can deploy a Will Brennan at some point later in that lineup?
Yeah. And you still want Manzardo against a righty at the top of the order anyway. I think that Fry Manzardo thing should just stay in the number 2 spot. And I mean, the big thing for this lineup, Stephen Kwan being on base 3 times was an excellent sign.
Do you think he got it all?
Next tier
to lead off the game, do you think he got it?
I did, but apparently they turned off the wind tunnel. I don't know why they did that for the playoffs.
Silly.
You want it on?
Silliness.
Because I thought,
at least when Cleveland's batting,
Rocchio hit one to the fence too. But you need Ramirez and Kwan and Naylor to do what they do, and then that next tier is Fry and Thomas, and those guys. They lengthen the lineup. I would put Manzardo in there too, but that's the difference. We talked about what this lineup looked like 2 years ago in the playoffs, and you had Gabriel Arias playing first base, hitting 6th. You had Oscar Gonzalez hitting cleanup, and you were just, Kwan would get on base, and then you'd pray that he'd still be on base after Ahmed Rosario batted, and then Jose Ramirez maybe could hit an RBI double or a home run, and that was it. I mean, maybe Naylor maybe delivering something, but he also couldn't hit lefties then, right? Like, so there was just like so many pitfalls in that lineup, and now it is far from perfect. But at least it's way more formidable. I mean, that you saw it in the first inning. Things certainly broke their way, and Detroit kind of looked like they were playing defensive, like they were on edge. And the other thing is, they bring the infield in the first inning, and that tells you everything you need to know about the bullpen, because they feel like if they fall down 2-0, they're not coming back. So they had to play to just prevent every run they could. And so I just, this lineup is so much different when Lane Thomas is actually a threat and when David Fry is a threat. And they've found a way to make the most out of this Manzardo-Fry pairing. And so if Kwan's going well and Thomas is going well, like there's that 1 through 5 is very formidable.
I also like that we saw two really good at-bats, I thought, from Jhonkensy Noel. I know he struck out finally before it was over, and he was struck out courtesy of the umpire in one of his previous at-bats, which I felt bad because he did everything. Jhonkensy did everything right in that at-bat, and he earned the walk, and he got called out on a pitch that was clearly low. I wondered if it was a makeup call for Jose also getting a ball called low, which was borderline. I said it on the live stream. It's like maybe you could make a case that a seam touched part of the strike zone, but it wasn't like an egregious call. The Noel one was an egregious one, but I was more encouraged just by the quality of his at-bats, because we saw Detroit was looking at what the scouting report has been against Noel, right? Throw everything in the outside batter's box and just let this guy flail. And they tried that, and he spit on a lot of it. And I was very encouraged that we saw an at-bat that was much more under control. When I see him doing that, even if he didn't come through with some big base hit, I'm going to leave him in the lineup, because he's in a mental spot when he's doing that one of those swings is going to put you up by potentially 3 runs. And that's why I would continue to leave him, maybe not all the time, but certainly like game 2 against Skubal, a good pitcher like that, I want somebody in there that it could just get after a mistake and put it over the fence. And maybe that's the difference in the game. And when I saw 2 at-bats from Noel that were very encouraging, I thought, good. Because I'm more confident in leaving him in here in a playoff atmosphere that he's going to be able to come through for me.
100%. He's going to hit a home run at some point this postseason. That's going to change a game. It's in there. And I think just, again, for him, another guy who it's like, let him get the experience. Let him be. I know he had a really rough September, but that doesn't matter now. And like, you're putting him out there in game 1 of the playoffs. Like that is such a boost in confidence. His dad is in town, and it's his first time in the States, and it's his first time seeing him play in the major leagues. And they have such a funny relationship, because his dad will be no filter, and he'll say like, "Why did you swing at that pitch?" And Noel will be like, "Why don't you get in the batter's box and try to hit a 91-mile-an-hour slider, okay?" And so a lot of times Jhonkensy just shuts it down. He's
Give
like,
those to a reality show.
So while he was really excited for his dad to be here, he was like not so much looking forward to the baseball talk that it would foster. But just a cool experience for him. Like, this was a guy who,
yeah, that was cool.
Like, we didn't know if this was ever going to happen. And they got desperate, and they were cycling through outfielders. And he came up, hits a home run in his first at-bat, which, by the way, that was the game that Matthew Boyd decided he was going to sign with Cleveland. More on that in a minute. But
that's when everything changed.
But then, yeah, I mean, he's been a big part of this. And I don't know what his long-term future is. I don't know that, if he's going to have a sterling 15-year career in the big leagues. I don't know. Like, everyone's automatically going to draw parallels to Oscar Gonzalez and Framil Reyes, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a spot for someone with his kind of power on a playoff roster. And you see it all the time. Like, that is, if he's standing at the plate and you're a pitcher and he's got like that weird stance before he actually starts his swing. And I would be peeing down my leg if I was a pitcher, and I would just be like, because if you make the slightest mistake, that guy can hit it 550 feet.
On the broadcast, they were calling his dad Papa Christmas, which essentially Father Christmas, and that's a perfect nickname. That is a perfect, if Big Christmas is a perfect nickname for Jhonkensy, yeah, Father Christmas or Papa Christmas is a perfect one for his dad.
And Noel loves the nickname too. Like he said, he gets a huge kick out of it when fans call him that.
Good. Better than some of the other players that have played here and said, I didn't really like the nickname that I had. Well, why did you say nothing for 7 years? Whatever long it was. Anyway. Congrats on all the postseason success for Francisco Lindor. They mentioned on the broadcast, first time scoring 5 runs in the first inning of a playoff game since that 97 Indians-Yankees matchup. And I didn't like that because I remember that the Indians lost that game. Do you remember how they lost that game late? Well, think about it. I got the box score in front of me.
Remind me.
Do you remember what the top of the 97 Indians lineup would have looked like for this game?
Bip.
Let me remind you. Yeah.
Bip, Omar, Tomey?
In this game, it was Manny Ramirez. I don't think they really ever knew what to do with that cleanup spot with this team. Matt Williams was there some of the time. Justice was there some of the time. Tomey and Ramirez. The funny thing is, like, all of them, sure. Sure. But the crazy thing is, Sandy Alomar had such an amazing year, and he's hitting, what, 6th in this lineup? No, 7th in this lineup. And he'll play a key role in this first inning. So David Cohn starts for New York. Start with a Bip Roberts walk. He steals second. What's Omar got to do?
Bunt.
Got to bunt him over. All the great hitters in this lineup were giving away the second spot in the first game. And okay, anyway, Manny Ramirez singles to center field. Bip would have scored from second, but anyway. Single to center field, Bip Roberts scores, and you get Jim Tomey a single to center field. David Justice grounds out, so there's 2 outs in the inning. Matt Williams up, wild pitch, Manny Ramirez scores. Then you get a hit by pitch to Matt Williams. Now 2 guys on base for Sandy Alomar. Poop. 3-run bomb. It's 5-0 Tribe. Before Brian Giles, who's hitting 8th in this lineup, fly ball to right field. That's it. You're thinking 5-0. The Indians are rolling, right? They eventually go up in this game, I believe, 6-1.
Wait, wasn't this the Eric Plunk game?
Then you get in the 4th inning, Tino Martinez gets a home run. The Yankees in the 5th inning come up and get a sac fly off of Oral Hershiser. But then we get to the bottom of the 6th inning. Here it is. Eric Plunk's in this game. Get Chad Curtis, a pop out to first base, then a single by Wade Boggs, a ground out by Joe Girardi. So there's 2 outs in the inning. Should be right. Just a runner on base. No big deal. No big deal. Ray Sanchez. I don't even remember. Single to right field scores Wade Boggs. And then, Tim Raines. Derek Jeter. Here comes Paul Asemacher to face Paul O'Neill. There you go.
The headline in the Plain Dealer the next day, in all caps,
it's your favorite.
Size 144 font, was Kerplunk.
You think he's got one of those hanging up? Like you got yours hanging up? Would you frame that? What would you do with that?
Yeah, honestly, I would. Like that's like a memory for me. I've used that in either articles or books before, and it's just it's a snapshot in time. I like stuff like that stands out. And I just I guess that's like my first memory of maybe like the newspaper. Maybe I can pretend like that's when I knew I wanted to be in sports writing. So I saw that creative headline that stuck with me.
None of the headlines belong to you. And that would sometimes be to your detriment as players are like, where are you? I thought about this headline. I didn't write it, man. I had nothing to do
That
with
is
this
true.
headline.
Yeah, that happens too.
How much of a factor do you think in the positive it was that a team that there's conversations being had nationally, somewhat locally, rust versus rest. Oh, could this be a big thing for this Guardians team that they didn't play for the last 5 days, and this Detroit team just survived, and they went into a very hostile territory in Houston, so they're mentally where they need to be, physically where they need to be. Do you think there's anything, whether it's silencing our narrative, but maybe more importantly within their own clubhouse walls, that they got off to that fast start and that was immediately put behind them? They might, who knows, they could lose this series because they're going to face an extremely good pitcher in 2 of the next 4 games. But it's probably not going to be because of some rust factor.
Yeah, I also wonder if there's something to the longer you sit around and wait, the more you try to overdo things. Where it's like, ooh, we've got all this time off. Let's hold extra meetings. Let's study even deeper. And let's study so much, let's game plan so much that we game plan our way out of a victory. Like Hedges was saying, like, the big thing is we kept it boring. We did our work. We held the meetings we always hold. And we didn't make this out to be something it's not. For all the hoopla, the pomp and circumstance, the flag the size of the state of Texas, the flyover, the sellout crowd, it was loud there. The national media in town. You step on the field, it is the same game. And so you spend the week, like, the rust thing, I don't know. Like, it's not like, do we talk about this with the All-Star break? Or no, because everybody is going through the same thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's a long season. I think guys are kind of happy to get a few days off. Clear the mind, refresh you. I think we make a big deal out of it because what really happens is it's a 5-game series and there's just so much randomness involved. That's baseball.
Yeah.
It probably should be a best of 7. I've never really understood why the division series isn't a best of 7. But in the NBA, you make the 67 win 1 seed beat the 38 win 8 seed 4 times. I don't know. I think they were able to not let the moment get too big. And you're right. Like, there's no better way to silence that than with a 5-run first inning.
You know, for teams like Cleveland, New York, and Los Angeles, not a factor. In that Mets-Phillies series, huge factor. Huge factor. The Mets have been playing for their playoff lives for what seems like months, certainly for weeks. And coming from behind and having these big, thrilling, late post-game, post-season moments. So it's a big factor in that series, but 3 of the other 4 was not in that first game. We love narratives. It's how we explain what happened. You know, I think there's just some degree as humans, we don't like just saying there's no control here. We control nothing. We have no ability to know what is going to happen. We don't like that. We want to have some way to explain what we're witnessing. And so we'll just latch on to the thing that makes the most sense, and I'll buy it. I'll buy that a team is, they're not really mentally and physically where they want to be because this is a game all about coming back the next day and getting into a routine. The routine was broken up. That's why the Phillies lost in Game 1.
You said we love narratives? Game 2 matchup. Matthew Boyd, Tarik Skubal. When Boyd signed with the Guardians, and they showed interest in him early, they attended his showcase in early June. Boyd tuned in to that Orioles game in late June, where I believe the Guardians, I think with that win, they moved to 51-26, and it was their high point in the season, 25 games over. And Boyd saw how much energy was in the dugout, and that's when he decided, he's like, these guys are having so much fun. They need pitching. They've helped so many pitchers over the years. Perfect place to sign. That's when he made up his mind. So he signs with the Guardians, and he gets a text from Tarik Skubal, and it's one word: traitor.
Oh, no.
So these guys, they both are from like Seattle, Washington area. Boyd's known about Skubal since Skubal was in high school, and in 2020, Skubal came up, and Boyd was his mentor. And it was funny. I was talking to Boyd, and he's like, I think the statute of limitations is off on this, so I can say, but 2020, COVID season, Boyd would have Skubal and Casey Mize over to his hotel room, and they'd find an upscale steakhouse. They'd get this huge spread delivered. They'd drink some wine, and it was great bonding, and Skubal kind of learning the ropes from Boyd, this other lefty who came up with the Tigers and who had Justin Verlander, who did it for him. So they've been close over the years. They've dealt with similar injuries. As Boyd is going through his Tommy John rehab, he was talking with Skubal and just getting advice on how to fight through it. And they still talk regularly. And now they're going to face off in game 2. And it's crazy how the baseball world works sometimes. And no one would have seen this coming for many reasons. No one saw the Tigers being here. No one saw the Guardians be here, if you rewind even further. No one saw Boyd being a starter on a playoff team. Maybe some people saw Skubal becoming an ace, but just all of these things that had to play out for this to happen is pretty wild. So it was funny. Skubal was like, it's special that we're here. Like, it's crazy how we got to this point, and I will be rooting for him pretty heavily, or rooting against him pretty heavily in game 2.
Like a showdown, Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker. See who gets the better of it. Because, those two pitchers are going to face each other. Literally, they're going to get out there and rumble. That's the way we look at it. Has nothing to do with the lineup that they'll be facing. But that is a great story. And I hope it ends there. I hope that's the end of the story, because the teacher is still teaching that youngster a few things out there on the mound. Game 2. Let's do it all again, bud. Let's do it all again. But let's get you a working pair of headphones first.
Never fails. Yeah, don't break during the season or the All-Star break. Let's break after game 1 of the playoffs.